only the apologists that seem to have come from another century. They're the old apologists. They're the bad apologists that really.
I don't feel like I as an outsider should make a judgment about who are the good and bad apologists, but
Well, I will.
I'm back with Dan Vogel, the greatest living historian of early Mormon history, and I don't think I'm exaggerating there. At least that's my view on it.
Joseph Smith didn't answer any of that. Never answered his relatives, never answered the neighbors, never disputed the magic or money digging or seer stone or anything. Never said a word. All he did is publish his own version.
Well, I think he made a statement about how, well, if I was a money digger, I wasn't a very successful one because I only made $14, right? Didn't he say something like that?
Yeah, and the only time he ever mentions money digging is to imply that he was nothing but a digger.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about the money digging. So we alluded to it a few hours back.
He only dug. I dug, and I talked the guy out of doing it anymore, and we quit.
So money digging. So the audience who isn't familiar with this will have no idea what that is.
Yeah.
Tell us about money digging. Let's go. And this has to do with the mound builder myth, doesn't it?
No, not so much. Yes and no, but there were treasures from the Indians that there
were actual treasures from India
that were hidden. They believed, like there was a golden throne.
Okay. So there were. Did anybody ever find gold? Let's find out. Okay.
No, we never found anything.
Okay.
Really?
So there is this whole culture of every time there's a hill, they believe it's man-made, and so that's why I connected to the mound builder myth. And then there's gold in that hill, and so people are going back over 100 years before Joseph Smith. We have, I think, Thomas Jefferson or somebody, or maybe not 100 years, but decades before. He's describing how people are out in the countryside and they're digging holes, wasting their time, looking for treasures. Benjamin Franklin. Okay.
Yeah, Jefferson dug in the mounds, and
I meant Benjamin Franklin.
He was the first archaeologist, kind of. But Benjamin Franklin, he talked about people consulting astrologers for the best time to dig for money, and they would look for various things. And seers, Joseph Smith wasn't the only one putting a stone in his head. There were more than you think, anyway. In his own neighborhood, there were several people that had stones. There was Sally Chase, was the main seeress, a neighbor of his, that had a green stone that would look in her stone. There was William Stafford down about a mile south of their farm. He had a seer stone also, and one of his sons had a seer stone. There was Samuel Lawrence. Samuel Lawrence was one of the major seers in the area that actually went up on the hill with Joseph Smith and said he saw the plates in his stone. So there were seers around. Joseph Smith wasn't an oddity, but it was a competition that I argue that he was trying to win. This was his major goal in life at this time, was to be the best seer in Manchester.
Okay. So there's this whole culture.
Yeah.
There's this culture that they believe that the Native Americans have, what they call the Indians, have buried treasures in the ground. Actually, some of them have to do with the pirate. I forget his name. That he buried stuff.
Well, there's Captain Kidd, Bluebeard.
Okay. So that could be a pirate buried. Pirates. So either one of the pirates buried stuff in the ground, or the Indians buried stuff in the ground. And these people who are dirt poor, I look at this like people play the lottery today, and they spend their children's lunch money, literally in some cases, on the lottery.
Yeah.
Because they're like, my life is so horrible. I just want to strike it rich to change my life. And I think, is there something to that these people who are just so poor, and they think if I could just find some gold, my life would be so much better?
They're desperate.
Yeah, it comes from desperation, I think, to some extent.
Yeah. So they got paid for doing it sometimes.
But the people paying them are thinking, boy, I could change my life if we could just find some Indian, silver.
Yeah, and so what makes you start digging, and where do you dig, and those kind of questions come up. But back then, people buried their valuables.
So that was a real thing that happened, not they believe, they actually did.
Okay. There were no banks around in some of these places out in the country, especially. Mm-hmm. And they were afraid of thieves, and they would bury their treasures or money. People would know so, old man so-and-so, he died, but where is his money? He must have buried it somewhere on his property. And they would try to find it. And they would look for other things like minerals, even salt. They would look for salt, and they would look for whatever they needed. And they would use divining for all sorts of things. Lost objects. Somebody, I lost my cows. I can't find my cows. Where are my cows? Let's go ask Joseph to look in his stone and find my cows. And they would try different seers sometimes, and one would be better than another, and one would start, having a better reputation. And one method, let's say, it was mentioned by a couple of the early sources, and that's during an 1830 trial. Abraham Benton said that the rumor was that Joseph Smith had stolen some of the stuff and then pretended to find it.
Mm-hmm. And there was a thing in the law about pretending to find things. Tell us about that.
Well, there was the statute on the New York books that said that, and the law just assumed you were fake. Okay, mm-hmm. They didn't assume, there's true and false ones. And when Joseph Smith went to trial, his defense was, I'm a real one. Well, that didn't work. But it was anybody pretending to discover lost money, or I forget the exact wording now, but it's all sorts of juggling is the one term they use.
And juggling doesn't mean what it means today. It meant
not juggling people, situations and people and things. And
juggling basically meant a scammer, if I understand correctly, right?
A what?
A scammer, someone who's deceiving someone.
A con
man. Yeah. Okay.
Con man.
So they had this belief that you could dig and find treasures, and you went to supernatural agents who would look into a stone. Yeah. So did Joseph Smith invent the thing of putting the stone in the hat, or did other people do that?
No, other people did it.
Okay. So that was just a thing at the time.
Yeah. And they had different kinds of stones. Some were transparent. Mm-hmm. They would hold it up to the light, transparent ones up to the light. Mm-hmm. And Sally Chase had a green stone set in a paddle, like a little wooden tiny paddle, so she could hold it.
And that was one of the neighbors.
Yeah, that was one of the neighbors. Okay. One of his competitors. And as one account says, that he looked into her stone to find his first stone. And he found that stone, but it didn't quite work. But the stone that he finally got, that brown one that's in the church archives today, was found while digging a well on the Chase property.
Why do you believe that it was a well and not
I don't necessarily do.
And not a money hole?
It probably was a money hole.
Okay. That sounds more likely to me.
Says it was a well.
Right. So let's go back to Philastus Hurlbut. There's this ex-Mormon in 1830, 1832 or something?
1833 and 1834. He went and collected.
So he goes around to Joseph Smith's neighbors and says, I want you to tell me what happened, and then sign it as an affidavit. Yeah. And this is to discredit Joseph Smith explicitly.
Yes.
I think he says he'll wash his hands in the blood of Joseph Smith or something. This guy hates Joseph Smith.
When he believed the Spalding stuff, he was a sincere believer. He didn't make it up. It was being... The people were testifying that it was a similar story long before he came along. And he came along and heard it, and he just collected hey, can I get your statement on that, kind of a thing. And he collected statements. He didn't make up the Spalding theory to destroy Joseph Smith. He actually lost his testimony based on some of that information.
So I read, that's the book I actually read, all of your footnotes. I think all of your footnotes. Of Mormonism Unveiled. So that was a book published in, I think, 1834 by E.B. Howe, who was upset because his wife converted to Mormonism, right? So he's upset, and he says, I'm going to publish all these statements from Philastus Hurlbut, who was not a doctor. His name was Doctor. That's kind of crazy. That itself is a crazy story. His name is Dr. Philastus Hurlbut, but his name is Doctor. So E.B. Howe publishes these because he's upset that his wife has converted to a religion he doesn't believe in, and he wants to discredit Joseph Smith. So that's where so the apologists like Stoddard, I think, would say, or I think she does say, why should I give up my faith? Dan Vogel says we should believe Philastus Hurl, but he hated Mormons. Why would I listen to somebody who hates Mormon? It's essentially an argument, an ad hominem argument. Talk to me about that.
Well, first of all, E.D. Howe, before his wife joined and his sister joined,
sister as well.
Okay. He was already publishing in his newspaper, the Painesville Telegraph, and he was publishing statements about the Mormons that were critical. He also got a document from somebody, probably a guy named Abner Cole in Palmyra, that had 10 Palmyra residents' signatures talking about Joseph Smith money digging. So this is way before Philastus Hobart even was converted or anything. Mm-hmm. So E.D. Howe they were already doing that. So people in Northern Ohio with the Mormons already have heard about the money digging claims from 10 residents that they didn't include the signature when they published the document. Mm-hmm. Residents testifying that Joseph Smith and his father were money diggers, and they wanted to know more about that. So they hired Philastus Hurl. They hired him to actually help pay for his trip to gather these statements. And they were upset with the Mormons, of course, in their community, and they heard these things and they wanted more, and to publish it, whether they were positive or negative, it doesn't really matter, because the neighbors are doing it. So then Stoddard and these kind of apologists have a circular definition, in a way, going of these people are biased against Joseph Smith. Well, how do you know they're biased? Because they said something against Joseph Smith. It's like you can never say anything against Joseph Smith and not be biased. So,
well, I mean, Philastus Hurl was obviously biased against Joseph Smith.
What about the neighbors?
So all the neighbors who had positive things, we don't have their affidavits, right?
There's a former friend of the Smiths who also said negative things. Okay. He stated that Philastus Hurl came into the neighborhood and collected affidavits, but he didn't collect one from him because he wasn't. He didn't criticize the Smiths hard enough.
Okay.
And
all right. So he's admitting there's
so the neighbors are saying, oh, Joseph Smith and his father drank too much, especially the senior Smith was a drunkard and a noted drunkard. But Lorenzo Saunders over here, he would say, yeah, they drank, not any more than the rest of us.
Okay. If you spoke to my neighbors from when I was a kid, they would say, oh, those are the jerks who never put their dog on a leash, and the dog used to poop on our yard. Yeah. And that's actually probably true. Mm-hmm. But then the positive things they wouldn't have known because we didn't necessarily share that stuff with them, right? Or I certainly didn't. Yeah. So and I guess in the country, neighbors are different than in the city. Like I have neighbors who I've never met, right? Yeah. In the city, it's kind of, it's kind of like a bit different maybe in some cities anyway. So here's my concern, right? So if you could collect a whole bunch of documents. It wouldn't be affidavits because nobody had that concept. But you could collect a whole bunch of documents about Jews drinking Christian blood. Have you heard of the blood libels? You know what that is?
Blood? Wasn't Paul had a story about that? About Paul?
Who did?
The Apostle Paul. Isn't there a story about some kind of thing?
That I don't know that story. Oh. What I'm referring to is there's something from history called the blood libels.
Okay.
And it was an accusation that Jews would kidnap Christians and slaughter the children and use their blood to make unleavened bread on Passover. And this is such a pervasive anti-Jewish trope that it goes back at least 1,000 years. And you'll find it in modern Saudi newspapers reported as fact they'll give you the name of the specific Christian child in Egypt who was kidnapped and murdered by the Jews, right?
Yeah.
And it's utterly preposterous because Jews don't even eat cow's blood, let alone children's blood.
Right.
But so if somebody were to bring that to me and publish a book about it, I'd say, okay, those are anti-Semites. I don't take anything they say seriously. And you could say, how do you know they're anti-Semites? Because they say these horrible lies about Jews, right? So I know there's a difference between what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But I understand where they're coming from. They're saying, well, those people are anti-Mormon. Of course they say that, right? So help me explain the difference to myself and the audience.
They have a closed system altogether. I mean, it's a closed. There's no way to ever get any negative evidence in there.
No, I
How
understand.
would I ever prove it with this system of argument?
Well, no, but then you have somebody like Richard Bushman. Is it Richard Bushman?
Yeah.
Who is, if from what I've seen in his interviews, I don't know if this is still true. These might have been old interviews where he was like, he does like temple work and like he's a good stand. Is he still alive? So he, from what I understand, he's a member of the Mormon Church in good standing, right? So
yes.
So it's hard to accuse him of a bias. You can accuse him of liberalism, which is what Stoddard does.
Yes.
Right. Or I don't know Stoddard per se, but people from that perspective will say, okay, they're liberals and they're trying to undermine our faith with their liberal agenda. Mm-hmm. And okay, fine, but you can't say they're anti-Mormon, or anti-LDS. You could definitely say that about Philastus Hurlbut. And so why is it? Why do you do what you do? That's a more fundamental question.
I wouldn't consider myself an anti-Mormon because I'm not trying to deconvert anybody.
Okay.
I'm not interested in deconverting Mormons.
So why do you study this?
I'm only interested in dead Mormons.
Okay.
Mormons from the 19th century. That's as far as I go. I just want to find out what happened. What is the most probable reconstruction of the past that we can construct? What is the most defensible position you can take on whatever issue? What's the most defensible position? It doesn't mean that's what happened. Nobody can go back and get there. Nobody can go back and verify. Mm-hmm. There's no time machine. There's nothing. The best we can do is to get the most defensible interpretation. And until we get further information, we might discover some documents. It's not highly likely, but during my lifetime, I've seen some discoveries of a lot of documents. So I can't say it's not impossible. But there's a lot of people looking nowadays.
Well, like one of the important documents, I don't know if this is in your lifetime or not. I don't know how old you are, but I've heard you talk about and heard Bushman talk about, or read in his book, the 1826 trial or the 1826 a hearing, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Right. So for over a century, Mormon apologists said that didn't happen. Joseph Smith wasn't put on trial or didn't have a hearing in 1826 for illegally looking into a seer stone. And then tell us about the guy in the 70s who he found the bill. I mean, it's
well, so the knowledge of Joseph Smith's 1826 trial was not known until like 1880s or late 1870s. There were three separate publications of the trial, the transcript of the trial record itself. It's not a trial technically. I mean, they use trial, but it's a preliminary hearing.
Okay.
And the conclusion of the hearing is always in dispute. I mean, the apologist.
Well, what was the hearing about? Why was he put on? Why did he have a hearing?
Okay, so we'd have to back up a little bit even before this, but in October of 1825, Joseph Smith's ability or claims, because nothing happened, but his talent for finding treasures. And when they wouldn't get them, they would say they were enchanted and they slipped away. They got slippery and slipped. The evil spirit moved the treasure, or some sort of excuse. But there was enough evidence somehow, either through what I described before as stealing cows and finding them again or whatever. Joseph Smith built up a career that spread a lot further than, his little community. And this gentleman named Josiah Stoll, a well-to-do farmer in Chenango County, New York, which is about 150. It's like directly north from that Harmony, along the Susquehanna River. There's a Susquehanna River. It goes around the Great Bend of that mountain and then goes up north through New York. And a couple of counties, there's Windsor, and then it goes to Colesville, where this gentleman named Joseph Knight, who's also a money digger, lived. And the next county, Chenango County, that's Josiah Stoll. And both of these gentlemen are well-to-do, and they make friends with Joseph Smith even before Mormonism. And Joseph Knight actually gets converted later, but not so sure about Josiah Stoll. Maybe not. It's not certain. But if he did, he never pursued it very far. But so Josiah Stoll, he hears about Joseph Smith 150 miles away, being a seer. And actually, he probably got a letter from his son, Simpson Stoll, who lived in Manchester. Now, Josiah Stoll's only interested in buried treasure and seers because he has spent the previous summer, and this is like October when he gets to Joseph Smith's home. He spent the previous summer digging in Harmony, Pennsylvania. And he knows Isaac Hale and his Isaac Hale's family, and they may have even been boarding with them at this time before the second time. But this time they're up there. They have heard about a treasure in this Bend Mountain, in the mountain.
Yeah,
heard about a treasure being there, and a seer, a seeress named that all we know is Odal. This seeress lady had pinpointed some area in that mountain, and they were digging, and Josiah Stoll hired a group of men to go with them, and they were digging and digging and digging, and nothing happened, and they finally gave up. Then he goes home and he finds probably a letter from his son talking about Joseph Smith, this great seer, and he goes all the way there and hires Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith gave an exhibition of his skill by looking at his stone and describing his outhouses and homes back in Chenango County. And there's ways that psychics have of doing that kind of stuff. But
or maybe the stone really worked and he could see what the outhouse looked like.
There's always that possibility.
And isn't there somebody, you had a friend who was a scholar who said that? What was his name? You know what I'm talking about? Who believed that.
Oh, D. Michael Quinn.
Yeah, the magical worldview he wrote a book about.
He wrote the book.
And he was a devout Mormon, right?
He was a devout Mormon, if you can see that. Joseph Smith.
Early Mormonism and the Magic Worldview. Okay.
This is the second edition. I'm using it because I'm preparing a video on the top, on one of the part of the topic, but on the magic part. Well, so it's either Joseph Smith knows Simpson Stoll, and I mean he must have described where he came from, his home and stuff. Or he said it in such vague terms that Josiah Stoll applied his own interpretation on things. So, and that's usually how psychics do what is called cold reading, or hot reading is having knowledge that the other person doesn't think you have. But so there's those ways, and then there's, well, he really saw it in his stone, but never was able to recover any treasure.
That was inconvenient.
So
I've heard you say he should have used the stone to find the missing 116 pages.
Exactly. You're wow, that's pretty good. You're pretty quick.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
So that's true. Yeah. Why didn't he just find 116 pages? Or when it really mattered, it didn't work because he wasn't in control.
Right. And then the other example I've heard you give, which is a pretty, if I was a Mormon, this would really bother me, is he sent the people to Canada to sell the copyright, and they went to like the wrong city or something.
Yeah.
He should have looked in the stone and said, "Where do we go?" Right.
Or he went from Harmony, Pennsylvania, up to Colesville to meet with Joseph Knight Sr. to ask for help, financial help, but Knight wasn't home.
Okay, that wasn't a trivial trip back then.
It seems like he looked in his stone first to see if he was there.
Yeah.
Anyway, so so Josiah Stowe goes to Manchester in October 1825 and hires Joseph Smith and his father. And they all go down. They go back to his home, and he gets some other diggers. There's 11 people altogether. And they go down the Susquehanna to Harmony, Pennsylvania, and start digging there. And then Joseph Smith says that it's no longer there. It has slipped down the hill to another location, and they start digging there. And for a long time, there were several, like 5 different holes around that hill. And one of the holes was still there in the early 1900s. And a Mormon from Utah went there and photographed a guy standing in that hole.
Wow.
And wrote on the bottom of the photograph, "Mormon money hole."
So this is an important point. This isn't just Thelastus Hurlbut, who hates Joseph Smith, who's saying this. We have Mormons that are corroborating some of the details here.
Well,
I feel like we could actually corroborate more details about this story than we can about the history of the Book of Mormon, right? Like you can't. I can show you where. Well, I mean, you might say, I don't know. I don't believe you. You might say something like, "I don't believe the Red Sea was split by Moses," but I can show you where the Red Sea is.
Yeah.
But I can't show you where. What is the one in the big city of the Nephites that has a Hebrew meaning?
Zarahemla?
Yeah, Zarahemla, which means seed of mercy. Like, he might have just gotten lucky with that name. I don't know, because that's one of the names that actually has a Hebrew meaning. So yeah, where's that city? We don't know, but we know where, but here in the case of the holes, you can say, here's a picture of the hole, right? So somebody was digging those holes, right? It's almost like you can corroborate more details of Joseph Smith's money digging days than you can of the Book of Mormon itself, right?
Well, so far, so there's nothing. They have one spot that they get excited about.
Yeah, Nahum in Eastern Arabia. Yeah, you're gonna have to do better than that. So I want to read a passage here from 2 passages from the Book of Mormon. You talked about how the treasure slipped down.
So it's in the book.
So it's in the Book of Mormon. I couldn't believe that. So Helaman 13:31, and behold, time cometh that he curseth your riches, that they become slippery, that ye cannot hold them. In the days of your poverty, ye cannot retain them. And then Mormon 1:18, and these Gadianton robbers, which I assume is related to the tribe of Gad or something.
No, it's the kind of forerunners of the Masons.
Right, because they're the ones with the secret combinations. But the word Gadianton, I think he took from the word Gad, which has to do with Gedud, which is bands of could be bands of robbers. Although I don't know that he had that much Hebrew knowledge, but I don't know. And these Gadianton robbers who were among the Lamanites did infest the land, insomuch that the inhabitants thereof began to hide up their treasures in the earth. And they became slippery, because the Lord had cursed the land, that they could not hold them, nor retain them again. In other words, you're hiding your stuff in the ground to keep it from the Gadianton robbers. When you go to look for it, it's moved. And now Joseph Smith comes along, looks into his hat with the stone, and he says, "Oh, it's over there. We can find it, 1,600 years later, 1,500 years later."
Yeah.
But then when you actually get to that spot, it's moved. It's slipped again, is what you're saying.
There's a curse.
And so how did Michael Quinn, as a believing Mormon, he believed this, right? He believed that there were treasures in the ground that would slip when you would get too close to them, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, he believed magic and religion one and the same thing basically, and they if you believe one, why can't you believe the other? If it takes faith to believe in the miracles the Bible describes, or miracles you even hear about in early Mormonism, why is it different? Why is this different than that?
Right.
It doesn't require more
Look, and there's something to be said for that, meaning like one definition of magic is somebody else's religion.
Right.
Right. Now there are religions that have a category of magic, which is forbidden or permissible, depending on what your religious view is. But it's not that easy to define magic, right?
No, it's not.
Yeah. So okay.
It's a cultural. It's a kind of a cultural thing, and people you arbitrarily define it and decide what is orthodox and what is not.
Right. No, but there are also ancient religions, or even maybe some modern ones, where magic is orthodox and is accepted. Right.
Yeah.
So it's complicated. Like in Judaism, obviously, and Christianity, magic is forbidden. Yet there's people who are devout, who engage in magic, or even what they would say is magic. So it's complicated. All right. Okay.
He understood, and I understand that the folk magic, that a lot of the magic is Christian magic. The books that these people would be reading are mixing the Kabbalah, with.
I know about Kabbalah. That's Jewish.
Yeah. So
mysticism, which in many cases is just magic.
Right. So a lot of their English books take a lot of their information from the Kabbalah, and in the early Latin versions of magic, and all these things that have developed to Joseph Smith's time, the books that he had access to, like Francis Barrett. These are people in London. Francis Barrett's The Magus, it had all sorts of descriptions of magic, signs, symbols, things like that, talismans, that you can use to, ward off evil spirits and things like that. And the Smith family owned magic parchments, 3 magic parchments that were handed down,
which have Hebrew on them. So, let me demonstrate for you in the audience how pervasive Kabbalistic magic is in modern Judaism. Yeah. The state of Israel had to pass a law making it illegal to offer someone an amulet in exchange for their vote. They had to pass a law to define that as bribery, because it was a standard practice in certain communities to say, if you vote for this political party, we will give you this amulet that will give you different, positive. It'll make you rich, or it'll make your children healthy, or it'll cure you of cancer. So they actually had to pass a law to define that as bribery, because it was so pervasive, and frankly, it still goes on. So now that's not everybody in the Jewish world, but it was parties that were buying votes by, and how much does it cost to make an amulet? A few cents, right? You just have to have a rabbi make a blessing over it, and you got an amulet. Maybe a few dollars, because you have to have somebody sit and write a parchment, or maybe you print the amulet and they don't know the difference, right? So that's today in the 21st century. This is something that in Jewish history, and I look at amulets as magic. I would think that's the quintessential example of magic. There are debates between rabbis about what's in an amulet, like a famous debate in the 18th century between these two rabbis in Hamburg about the one rabbi's amulet has forbidden things in it. But the question about, wait a minute, why are you even doing amulets in the first place? Nobody even talks about that in this particular event. So now translate into the Christian world, the influence of Kabbalah, and particularly the amulets, is profound. You can go to I was at the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, and they have all these Hebrew amulets that have nothing to do with Jews. Like the name Jesus is in the amulet, right? It's clearly people whose Hebrew isn't even that good writing the amulets.
Yeah.
So you could tell from the script that it's not somebody with Jewish training who wrote the Hebrew letters. So you have Kabbalah having a profound influence on the Christian world, and some of that pouring over into Christian magic.
Yeah.
So Joseph Smith is growing up in this environment where this stuff is pervasive. But then
I'm studying the parchments that were handed down. They're called laymen, but they're like little parchments, and they were kept in a bag and kept around the neck.
Yeah.
And it would to ward off evil spirits. And one of them is titled "Holiness to the Lord."
Mm-hmm.
On three sides of it, and then the tetragrammaton at the bottom, and then another one, Saint Peter bind them, is the short title that we give it, but it has a longer thing. It's about Peter binding the evil spirits and protecting the magician, and so that he can get the treasure. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
So when the treasure is located, now they have to get it out of the ground without it slipping away. And so,
because treasures are slippery. So let's go back. He's with Josiah Stowell, and he's helping him find a silver mine or something like this. And how does he end up in court?
Well, so that lasts about a month, and they end that project because in failure. And so Josiah Stowell hires Joseph Smith, who's like 20 years old, 19, 20 years old, to work on his farm and to keep on looking for treasures along the Susquehanna River up north near his home. And while he's doing that, and Joseph Smith's taking money for it, one of his relatives gets upset.
$14 a month, right?
That's what Joseph Smith later said.
Okay.
That he got paid. I don't know.
Yeah. So this is important. Joseph Smith doesn't deny he was involved with digging for treasure for Joseph's soul. He just says, "Well, I was a technician. I was a laborer."
In his official history, he makes it sound like he was digging, and it was never profitable. And he finally prevailed upon Josiah Stowell to stop. Well, why would a digger have anything to do with? Why would you stop him from digging if you're still getting paid? So it's the fact is that he was the leader of that group. He was the seer, but he was following his instructions of where to dig. He suppresses that information in his official history. So he's less than forthcoming. And that's his answer to E.D. Howe's book. That's all he gives. He doesn't respond to it honestly, really, and tries to cloud it over without really addressing the exact facts of what happened. So it's an official history and not to be trusted, really.
Well, so I think what I can say from my perspective is Joseph Smith was biased, and so was E.D. Howe. And if you look at enough sources, you can try to figure out what was going on. I think that's what you do.
That's what we have to do.
And if you've got,
it's not a simple matter of saying Joseph Smith and all these Mormons are telling the truth, and all these non-Mormons are telling the lies. And that's
if you've got David Whitner saying he's still using the seer. David Whitner saying his problem is he's not using the seer stone, which was the true source of revelation. Then I guess the seer stone thing is real, and now we have a picture of it, right? So, all right. So he's looking for treasure with the seer stone, and how does that land him in a preliminary hearing in 1826?
Yeah. So Josiah Stowell's nephew, actually Peter Bridgman, he gets upset, and in behalf of the family, he sues or writes out a complaint, on Joseph Smith. And Joseph Smith, there's a warrant issued on him for his arrest, and he gets arrested, and he goes before this Justice Albert Neely, a justice of the peace in South Bainbridge, now Afton, Chenango County, New York, and he's tried. And so we have the transcript of the trial, and some people testified against him, some people testified on his behalf. Josiah Stoll testified in Joe Smith's defense, saying that he believes that Joe Smith has a gift, and he talks about that Joe Smith saw his house from all the way from Palmyra, New York, and
this has nothing to do with Philastus Hurlbut. This is
nothing.
This is a transcript that was published by three different sources.
Sources by Albert Neely's niece, who went to Utah in the 1880s to be a missionary to the Mormons.
So let's acknowledge some bias there, that she wants people to leave Mormonism and become evangelical Christians or whatever she was. So you could say she made the whole thing up, but then someone corroborated the prices that were quoted.
That's it.
Right.
That's it.
So tell us that's the most. That's an incredible piece of evidence. Like I said, it's the kind of thing that like you would dream to find this kind of thing in Christian history. You know, the imagine if we found the what do you call it? The lumberjack who cut down the tree that was carved to make the cross for Jesus. I mean, imagine that kind of like level of information. We couldn't even fantasize about finding that. And we find the bill in the courthouse in New York. I mean, it's the same as what was published in the 1870s or whatever, right? From Albert Neely's niece.
Right. So it's, like I said, published 3 different times, showing that this niece had something. She claimed it was she either had the whole docket book that Albert Neely used, to record his cases, or she had torn the pages out and they published those, which got lost probably in a fire in Utah in one of the churches of the last person that published it. And there's little variance. You could tell the person's having a hard time reading some parts, and so the apologists flat out just say, "Oh, it's forged. It's not real. It's it's all a anti-Mormon lie." So this went on. I mean, I had the whole transcript of different people testifying and what Joseph Smith did, talked about slippery treasures and things like that. And you have to also remember that even at this point when it's published, why would an anti-Mormon write this and make Josiah Stoll testify that Joseph Smith is a true prophet? He really could see in his stone, and he found treasures and another that slipped away. And another guy testified in Joseph's behalf in the same way. They're testifying in Joseph's behalf that he can use that stone.
I don't know. People lie. People lie all the time.
Evidence like that.
So I'll answer that, right? And I think it's probably authentic, right? Yeah. But the answer would be, well, people lie, and part of the way they lie is they say something positive about somebody else that includes a lie within it. In order for you to say, well, why would somebody make that up about Nehemia? It's half of it is positive because they want to slip in the part that's negative, right? So could it be a lie? It's entirely possible the whole thing is a lie and there was no 1826. I guess you really can't say at this point there was no 1826 hearing because of the document that was found in the 70s. So talk about that.
Yeah.
You could say the testimony was fabricated and that what they were really talking...
Hard to believe that they would write anything positive about Joseph Smith's gift with the stone. That Josiah Stoll believed it. He mentioned other evidences that he had to believe that Joseph Smith had a true gift. It just doesn't work for me. But
I agree with you with the little I know about it, but I can understand where the apologist is going to come up with because look, the apologist felt the thing in their heart that said Joseph Smith is a true prophet. Yeah. So now they have to deal with that reality and say, I know he's a true prophet. How do I explain away? Because here's the bottom line. It sounds really...
First of all, this doesn't make him a false prophet.
No, but let's be honest here. Here's the real issue, right? Tell me if this is wrong.
Yeah.
So Joseph Smith is looking for treasures of gold using a seer stone, and there are spirits that protect over the treasures and move them around.
Yeah.
Gold plates protected by a spirit called Moroni, and Moroni is moving the treasure around. And why do I say moving it around? When he first went there, he took it out of the hole. Am I wrong about this?
Well,
and he looked down and it was gone. It was back in the hole or something like that,
yes,
right?
You're right.
So it sounds exactly like the treasures. And then Richard Bushman would say,
it
yeah,
is
God
exactly like the treasures. I
So
mean,
Richard Bushman would say, yeah, God was preparing him for the discovery of the gold plates. So, you know, he does say that God was preparing. Who else would find the gold plates and believe the angel Moroni except somebody who had experience with spirits, right? Or believed in spirits.
there is a
right?
connection, but and you would the Stoddards have to deal with. Well, he used the same stone that he translated the Book of Mormon with later to earlier find treasures that slipped away and never found any treasures. How do you explain that? If it didn't work then, now why do you think it worked here? And that's
because the treasures weren't real and the Book of Mormon was real. I don't know what they would say. Maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. All right. So
that's why they didn't want the stone being used. One reason. The other reason is Joseph said the spectacles were preserved specifically to translate with.
Okay.
Why would he change instrument?
Right.
It's because he didn't plan on using the spectacles even to begin with in the story at all. But that's another.
We'll get back to the spectacles because that is an interesting part of the story.
Yeah.
But the document in the 70s, that's important.
Yeah. So then, so the Mormon apologists are denying that the trial took place. We have Hugh Nibley, the great Mormon scholar, linguist at BYU, saying it would be the most damning evidence ever. But I don't believe that's true.
That didn't age well that he said that. He probably shouldn't have backed himself into a corner like that.
Yeah, he didn't need to say that. Okay. So Wesley Walters, my friend Wesley Walters, the Presbyterian minister, very interested in Mormon history. He decided he was going to try to find records associated with that transcription. He tried to find the transcription, but he found it was probably burned in the fire in Utah.
Yeah.
So he decided, well, you know, there has to be other county records of this. This probably was the personal docket book. If Neely had it and then his niece had it and took it to Utah, it wasn't the county record, right?
Okay.
It's his personal docket book. And so he says, well, there's got to be other records in the county. And that's what he went after. And he started looking and looking and looking. And finally, because they move records around over the hundreds or so years, he finally found that they were located in the basement of the jail. And he went there, and it just as it happens, they were in cardboard boxes. All these, you know, they usually have them like folded up into little transcriptions and then tied together in bundles, you know. And they had them tossed in a cardboard box up against a wall underneath a window that was leaking. And they were soaking wet. And so he found them. You know, you have to find the right bundle, and then you have to go through the bundle. You find the bill that Albert Neely sent the county. He also found the bill that the arresting constable sent the county.
Wow.
And he laid them out and took photographs of them, and he was with another gentleman. And they were so worried that these were going to perish. What are they going to do with them? Fold them up? They weren't sure if they told anybody they were there, that they would be there when they came back, you know, because they might get stolen or something. So they did remove them from the jail, which was not very cool. But they removed them, and I think they took them to a preservation university somewhere to preserve.
Do they still exist, those documents?
Yeah, I've seen them. I went there and I looked at them myself.
Wow.
They are water damaged one side, which is the reason I wanted to see them in person, because the stain was so dark brown that I couldn't read all of the writing. And so I had to go and see it in person and to make the best transcription I could.
Has the Joseph Smith Papers published these documents?
Yes.
They have?
Yeah.
Wow.
They're online under like legal.
Okay, that's cool.
Legal section, and there's a New York section, and then you can go to the year 1826. They also have the records for the 1830 trial.
Wow.
Which proves that this 1826 trial took place because they were retrying him on the same charges.
So the people who published the Joseph Smith Papers, which is part of the church, they're not denying this took place.
Nope.
Okay.
Only the apologists that seem to have come from another century. They're the old apologists. They're the bad apologists that really.
I don't feel like I as an outsider should make a judgment about who are the good and bad apologists. But
well, I will because
and you come from a Mormon background. You can do that. I don't feel like that's my place.
It's embarrassing.
Wow.
It's embarrassing to everybody concerned.
Okay. Wow.
Besides this group.
If the word fundamentalist didn't mean something else in the Mormon context, I would use that. So we can't.
Yeah,
we can't because it means something else.
Fundamentalists.
What's that?
They're not fundamentalists.
Right. Not big F fundamentalists.
Yeah, they are the earlier thinking type Mormons that don't care what anything says. They're just going to proclaim this is the way it should be. Mm-hmm. I wish it to be this way, therefore it is this way. And they're not trained. They don't have any training. They haven't. They don't.
Well, this is an open invitation to the Stoddard lady to come on this podcast and give responses to all these points. I'd actually love to hear her. And maybe someone will share this with her and she can come and explain. And I'll be respectful, right? I mean, within my religious tradition, I am, in a sense, a fundamentalist. I'm also a critical scholar, right? So like I said, I wear two hats and I'm comfortable with that dichotomy. I believe Moses wrote the Torah, or it was revealed through Moses. Let's put it that way more precisely. Joshua also was involved. And so I want to respect people who are coming from a devout perspective, but I also want to hear what the truth is. Anyway, thanks so much for all your time.
Thanks for having me.
I hope we are able to broadcast all of this. We've been recording at this point, guys. I think this is a personal record for me. We've been recording for, I want to say, almost like 7.5 hours or something like that. So thanks so much.
All right.
Shalom. Goodbye. Thank you. Shalom to your wife.
Yes. Sure.
You have been listening to Hebrew Voices with Nehemia Gordon. Thank you for supporting Nehemia's McCore Hebrew Foundation. Learn more at nehemiaswall.com.